everybody. I have Andrew here with me today, and we are going to be talking about artificial intelligence and getting started on that journey today. But before we dive into the questions that I have, Andrew, can you give everybody a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Emma. So my name's Andrew Burgess. I'm a strategic advisor on artificial intelligence, which means that I help organizations create their AI strategy and really make the most out of their AI investments. As well as that, I'm an author, so I've written a book called The Executive Guide to Artificial Intelligence, which published about a year and a half ago. I write for various journals and speak at conferences when we're allowed to speak at conferences. Otherwise, it's a lot of webinars at the moment. But that's me.
Well, great. Thank you for joining us. And I think to get us started, I want to make sure everybody joining us for the video has kind of a shared definition of what we are talking about when we look at artificial intelligence. So can you give us a definition from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question because artificial intelligence is, it's a range of lots of different technologies, and it means lots of different things to lots of different people. There are the dictionary definitions of artificial intelligence trying to, using computers to try and mimic what the human brain does. But that doesn't really get us very far. And I think also the technical explanations kind of immediately exclude people if they don't know about algorithms, etc. So I usually explain AI in terms of its capabilities, what it can do, and I think that resonates with business people much better. So to kind of quickly talk about the different capabilities that it has, they fall under three main headings. The first one is about capturing data. Once we've captured the data, then we want to understand what is happening with that data. Once we understand what is happening, then we want to understand why it's happening. Okay, so within each of those categories, we've got different capabilities. In that, and also as well, we talk about unstructured data and structured data. So unstructured data, things like images, sounds, free-form text. Structured data, things like spreadsheets, web forms, databases, etc. Okay, so when we think about unstructured data, what AI is very good at is taking that unstructured data and making it structured. So things like image recognition and speech recognition, they're taking images and sounds that are essentially unstructured and making them structured so that we or other computers that work more traditionally can actually understand them as well. So, is this a picture of a dog or not? That's what AI does, or working out the words that somebody's saying as well. You can also do that with text. So if you want to read a free-form email that somebody's written, the AI can read that and then classify that message. Maybe it's a complaint or a query or a question or whatever. And also start to extract some of that metadata from the query as well. So if somebody's saying, I need to return a shirt that I bought, then the AI can start to work out whether it's, they want to do a return and it's about a shirt, for example. When we think about structured data and capturing the structured data, then the AI is very good at making sense of this idea of big data. So if you've got, customer shopping data, for example, then finding the correlations and the patterns within that data is a good task for AI because it's generally beyond the capabilities of human brain because of all the different dimensions that this data has. In theory, it could have thousands of different variables, and it's something that the human brain can't really do, but AI is very good at that. So that's capturing data. Once we've captured it and we want to understand what's happening, so we use tools like natural language processing. So taking those words that we've identified and working out the intent, what somebody wants to do with that, and also being able to reply. We've got prediction, so working out what's going to happen next. And then we've got as well optimization, so trying to find the best solution to a particular problem. Classically things like route finding. What's the best route to a particular place? AI can do that intelligently and efficiently as well. And just very quickly on that last piece around why something's happening. So this is the bit that we move out of reality and into essentially science fiction and labs, because everything I described so far is narrow artificial intelligence. So AI is very good at doing one thing very, very well. So recognizing pictures of dogs can do that very well, but that same AI can't recognize pictures of cats. It needs to be retrained to do that. or recognizing sounds, etc. This whole idea of understanding and cognition, which the human brain's brilliant at, AI can't do yet, and that's when we start to think about artificial general intelligence, and I say that's where the world of science fiction, etc. So if anyone says that their AI software has cognition and understanding, then they're going to be lying, because it just doesn't exist yet. It's going to be a combination of those other capabilities that I've just described. So for me, that's kind of the best way of thinking about AI, as kind of all those different capabilities that you can put together to make something useful out of.
Wonderful. Thank you. I like how you explained it by capability, because as you were talking, I was able to picture specific use cases that I interact with on a day-to-day basis, with whether it's the HomePod that's sitting behind me, or, the Are You a Robot, actually find the pictures of the stoplights using some reasoning behind it. So I appreciate that definition and kind of giving us all something to work off of as we move forward with the conversation. So you mentioned earlier that you do this strategic advising for organizations to help them figure out how they can start to leverage AI within their business. And so now that we understand kind of some of those capabilities and what the tool is possibly able to do for an organization, can you share some of your thoughts on, where do we start this evaluation process, or what are some of the questions that organizations should be asking themselves to help identify opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. So probably the very first question I ask a client when we start talking is, what's your ambition? What's your ambition with AI? And that can be a range of things. And there's no right and wrong answer here. It'd be different for different organizations, but it could be they just want to simply improve some processes, make them more efficient. And AI can do that. But also they may say, well, we want to fundamentally transform our business. We want to change it using AI. And that's great. And AI is, very, very capable of doing that. You can create digital twins of your business. And there's a whole range of things in between there as well, in terms of what AI can do. And depending on that ambition means that the first steps you take with AI will be different. So if you're just going to improve some processes, your first steps will be different than if you're going to fundamentally change your whole strategy. So that's kind of the important thing, understanding that ambition. Then the next thing is like, where are you now? What's your maturity with regard to AI? And so some people will have done nothing. Some organizations might have done a proof of concept on something. Some of them may have some models in place already, or that, some deployed AI models. So again, that depends on, that will then dictate the way forward. And of course, the difference between the ambition and where they are now, that's the scope of work. That's your working space, and that's kind of what you need to aim for. So that's the first bit. The next bit is to really understand that organization's objectives and challenges, because there's no point in doing AI if you're not going to get any value out of it. And the AI needs to address those business objectives and challenges, because sometimes I get clients or potential clients ring me up and they'll be saying, what can I do with AI? I want to use AI, or even I half jokingly say, can I have an AI, please? And I have to tell them, well, that's the wrong question to ask, because we need to understand what your objectives are and can AI address those objectives and challenges. And that's the bit you really map onto, and that's the kind of where the magic happens, of understanding those capabilities, which I described earlier, and then mapping those onto your business objectives and your challenges. And so within this strategic approach, having that value-led AI is important, and then identifying those opportunities which match it. And what we usually end up with is a list of, it can be 30, 40, sometimes 50 different opportunities for AI within that organization. And then we can start to prioritize those. We can prioritize them based on the business value. So how closely do they meet those business objectives? We can also prioritize them based on the ease that we can implement them. Some of them are going to be quite easy to implement. We can bring a vendor in, we can subscribe to that, etc., build something quite quickly. Or it might be quite difficult to do, and we've got to gather some data. There's lots of data work to be done. We're using some very complex algorithms, etc., and that's going to be difficult. So you can look at all these different factors and prioritize them. So what you end up with is this prioritized list of the opportunities, which I then kind of summarize into what I call a heat map. So where are these opportunities within the business? What's the value we can put against each of those? And then that starts to drive a roadmap. So what's the things we need to do next? What's the things we need to do in 6 months? What's the things we need to do in a year, etc. And that heat map, because you might say, well, we might say, well, there's lots of opportunities for, computer vision, for image recognition within this organization across all different departments. So maybe it's a good place to start is let's focus on that particular technology and implement it across the business. Or it might be you look in the customer services area and there's lots of different opportunities in computer vision, but also in prediction, in optimization, etc. So you might start by looking across a particular department, particularly if the manager of that area is enthusiastic as well. That's a big part of the battle, isn't it? Getting people on side. There's no point in starting a place that's going to be reticent to do it. So say that drives the roadmap, and the roadmap is really, really important because that really gives the executives that plan and saying this is the art of the possible for AI within your business, and this is how you get there. That really, that's kind of, if you wrap that up, that's your AI strategy, really. And that's a really important thing to have because, what a lot of companies do is they think, oh, we need to do something with AI. They quickly jump in and say, well, do a proof of concept on this because maybe their competitor's done it or maybe they've read about it somewhere. They'll do the proof of concept and maybe it's successful. They get some good numbers out on the spreadsheet predicting something, but then they think, well, now what? What do we do with this? How do I make this valuable? And actually, if they thought about it, maybe there's 10 other different proof of concepts they should have done that could have been more valuable or they could have done quicker. So the strategy gives you that roadmap to how to take it forward.
I think that value piece is so critical to any sort of technology implementation or digital transformation as a whole, and that prioritization of what you're taking on when. To your point, do you have some low-hanging fruit that you can capitalize on? If it's a large endeavor, what is the value going to be on the back end versus I was giggling on my end when you said, can I have an AI, please? Because it isn't that simple. And I don't know if we're ever going to hit a point where it is that simple. So I think that that's critical for organizations to understand. And I appreciate you talking through kind of that heat map activity and how you work through that with your clients. So when we look at, again, you've identified maybe that first area that we're going to dive into, let's say computer vision, like you mentioned, and you've helped connect your clients with the vendors or the data scientists that are going to be a part of that process. And we've talked about that your role typically is to stay on and help manage that implementation and provide some governance for kind of the AI program as a whole. Can you share your thoughts on kind of the importance of governance within within AI implementation? We talked about we're not going to touch on any of the ethics stuff, but more how do you manage these implementations and kind of put some parameters around them?
Yeah, it's a really good point. So, it's great having the strategy and, ideally the client then says to me, right, we want to do this strategy, we want to realize the strategy. And we've got this list of opportunities and it's really saying, well, the proof of concepts, you just start at the top of that list. So look at the top three, pick 2 or 3 of those that you can build. But to do that, you might need data scientists, you might need developers, you might need vendors or systems integrators, whatever it is. So part of my role is to help them find the right people to do that, bringing in the right teams, etc. Where a lot of businesses go wrong is that they kind of got the strategy, then they forget about the strategy, and they get so excited about doing this piece of work that they forget why they're doing the bit of work. And I think particularly with AI. And I don't want to disparage anybody here, but with data scientists, they love their work, but they love doing the more complicated stuff more than actually what the business might need. And they'd rather have a good challenge to solve than doing something that's actually probably to them quite straightforward, but to the business is really, really valuable. So managing the data scientists or the vendors to actually give you what you want is actually can be a challenge with AI. So keeping an eye on that, always going back to that business case. Why are we doing this? How does it link back to our business objectives is really, really important. Measuring things as well. So what's our measures of success for this particular piece? What's going to be meaningful? Is it an accuracy above 87% or something for some sort of prediction? Below that, we're not. So just make sure that we keep all of that in mind as we go forward, I think. The other bit for me as well is on that looking forward piece as well is what happens when we've got the POC. So as I talked about before, you've got a POC, you've got the outputs, and then you think, now what? What do we do with this? So having that plan to take this forward is really, really important. That bit of information is only going to be useful if the person is using it on a day-to-day basis and can have that information presented to them in the right way. So what they don't want is like a spreadsheet emailed to them every week. What they want is that integrated into their system. So it's, if it's a case management system or whatever it is, and have that presented to them. So you've got to think about how you then take that forward, how it's going to be deployed, and particularly things like optimization of the algorithms as well. So if it's quite a dynamic thing that you're modeling, you need to think about keeping that data up to date, keeping the models up to date as well. So as your data changes, that will change your prediction. So you've got to keep the models optimized. Who's going to do that? How often are you going to do it? So there's some real questions you need to make sure you understand, and keeping your IT people involved in that process, thinking about security as well. A lot of things that are very similar to normal IT projects, I think. But I think the idea of the data feeds and the optimization of the algorithms is particularly relevant to AI.
I think that is the key takeaway that I have here is that even though AI is on the cutting edge in some areas and seems like this really big, overwhelming idea, the same principles that we've used for any of the other side of digital transformation will still be key to your success with an AI implementation. And it's not a set it and forget it thing. And digital transformation is not a single point somewhere in the future that you're going to reach and stay at, because technology is changing so quickly. And so I think that's, a big thing from my perspective as I'm having all of these conversations is to truly transform your organization, you need to adopt continuous improvement, and that will go hand in hand with AI or any other technology that you're using.
Absolutely. Well, I think one other point that's worth making as well is around on the adoption side is the education piece. So at the beginning when we talked about, this is AI. So if you've got your senior executive team and they don't understand what AI is, they're not going to implement it. Nobody's going to say, yes, I'm going to spend this amount of money implementing something I don't understand what it's going to do. So you need to be able to educate your senior executive team on those capabilities of AI. They don't need to understand how to code algorithms, etc. That, by far from that. But that basic foundational understanding of what AI is, I think, is really, really important. If you don't have that, then you're not going to get the adoption later on in this process.
The art of the possible is a really powerful thing when you're going through a transformation in an organization. Well, Andrew, I really appreciate you joining me today and sharing your thoughts on AI and how to get started with anybody that's watching today. I would encourage everybody to make your way over to his LinkedIn, and I'm also going to include a link to the book that he mentioned for anybody that's getting started. That sounds like a great handbook for you to have alongside your journey. But please reach out to Andrew or I if you have any questions, and have a wonderful day, everybody. If you're looking for expert tips on how to get started with your transformation or looking to hone in on your approach, make sure that you subscribe to our channel to catch our weekly Digital Transformation Talk series, where we interview experts from around the world on how to make it happen.